Hello, this is Terry from Fabric Junction in Sturgis, South Dakota. Today I'll be showing you how to do a 2x2 block that we incorporated into a baby quilt. With this we used a 10-inch pack from Riley Blake of their medium dots to make our quilt and our blocks. So to start, pick out your favorite blocks, and here's how we're going to turn them into the 2x2. We need to cut this into 4 equal strips. If you don't have a ruler that is 5 inches wide, just fold it and give it a little finger press. That'll let you know where to cut. So the combination of both, I have a 5-inch ruler and I have my little finger press mark, I can cut my strip. Once they're cut, I need to cut them into 2 more. And as you can see, I stack them. Now I'm going to line them up on my 2.5 because they are 5 inches. I need to get my stack just right and recut into 2.5-inch strips. Now I have 4 strips, and I already cut my 2.5-inch strip that is my background color on the square. One of these strips will make 2 blocks. This will end up being 2 blocks. So the next step is to sew together, and I like to chain piece when I sew. So this is how we chain piece. Take your next one. You can either butt it up, get it fairly close, leave enough room because we do need to cut them apart there. And we're going to do that with all 4. Okay, once they're sewn, now I like to cut them into the sections that I need. So the first thing I'll do is now I'll cut off the selvage. And I line up, I pick a line so that I'm straight across the seam that I have sewn. So I cut off my selvage, and now we need to cut these into 4.5-inch sections. So I find the 4.5 on my ruler. Again, I'm lining up on the seam that I have sewn. I find any line, line up straight across on the 4.5 and cut. And I continue to do this all the way across. So you can see you'll have a little bit left over. So I just barely trim a little off that we don't use. And now I'm back to lining up at the 4.5 mark until I need at least 4 to do a block. And that's where I'm going to stop. Otherwise, we could continue and we'd have another block there. Once I have them cut, then I press. And I set the seam, then I open and I press to the dark. And I do stack mine. So I press and then press to the dark. Sometimes you can't always press to the dark because it creates too much bulk. So the rule of thumb is to the dark, or the part that's the less bulky. Once I have my pieces, I lay them out in the order they're going to be sewn. And let's see, I need that inside. And there is our 2x2 block. Now to sew, again, I like to chain piece, especially when I'm doing several of these. I'll grab 2 of them. And then I sew the bottom half of the square. And if I was doing more squares, I would just grab the top 2, then the bottom 2 again, and keep going. When I take them off my machine, I leave that string attached, and I open it up, and I make sure that I'm still correct, it's still laid out correctly. So then I fold, and this time I have to line up this center seam. And I learned to do it with my fingers by touch. And if it's correct, you'll see that there's a smooth transition. If you're more comfortable, go ahead and slip a pin in there to hold that. Sometimes you'll want to, let's see if I can get this one, doesn't want to turn, there we go. Sometimes you'll want to make sure that that seam is on the top is feeding into your machine. This one doesn't want to do it because I have a seam here, so it just naturally wants to lay that way, so I'm not going to fight it. I'm going to let it lay that way. So once I have that matched, then I match the top. I don't worry about the bottom yet because I want to get that much sewn. So I go to the machine and I sew that seam. And like I said, if I had more blocks to do, I would just keep right on sewing until I had them all together. Once I get to that center, then I match up my end here. Sometimes it's perfect, sometimes I need to ease the top a little, sometimes the back a little bit, but that's okay. So you gently pull and sew. We have all our pieces together, so now it's time to press again. Now we have the one seam that's already pressed. The other one, press the direction that it wants to lay. And then the one right down the middle, has to go one direction or the other. And you'll notice that when you go to press. And I press gently from the back side first, and then I come back and do the top side. So there is our 2x2 square made with a 10-inch packet of squares. And the reason I liked using the packet of squares is because of all the great color that I had to work with without having to buy a ton of yardage. With this, we did make this lovely quilt using all those squares with a little border. It has been very successful here in the shop as a great one for any child. Once you have learned the squares, you can make your quilt any size that you choose. The pattern for this, with the additional instructions on how much yardage you need and what to cut for your borders, is available on our website. Thank you for watching.